pretty feisty moment over on CNN that we wanted to bring to you where host Jake Tapper was aggressively pressing Larry Kudlow, who's, of course, White House economic advisor, on transparency around the coronavirus bailout funds. Let's take a listen.
Well, look, I think in terms of those that shouldn't have qualified, a lot of them have returned the money, and some of those have been named. But I think when Secretary Mnuchin talked about transparency, he talked about the transparency of the process of making the evaluation for the loan and then the distribution of the loan. By the way, for what it's worth, the Congressional Budget Office just put out a report complimenting the Treasury and the administration for getting all these forms of assistance out in a very rapid time. There's been nothing like its biggest rescue in American history, and the efficacious distribution, the whole system, which is transparent. There is an IG that's going to watch over that. That's what the Secretary is talking about. You know,
he said we will be reporting to the public.
No,
sir, I'm sorry.
Reserve.
He said we would report to the public. That's what he said. We will be reporting to the public. That's us, the American people, and we have a right to know where these tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars have gone. If there's no problem with it, if everything's fine with it, great. But otherwise, it is about as swampy a deal as I can ever imagine. The government giving out hundreds of millions of dollars, and the American people don't even get to know who got it.
Well, I don't know that I would judge it that way. I don't think it was sloppy. Again, I repeat.
Swampy.
That's a good moment.
To be clear, swampy, not sloppy.
I would say it was kind of sloppy, actually. But
it seems like all of the above, frankly. I mean, there are a couple things there. First of all, Kudlow being like, well, we said the process would be transparent, not necessarily that you would actually know where these loans went to, I thought was a pretty incredible attempt at spin there, which Tapper obviously tries to call him out on. And look, we have covered here relentlessly on this show. Democrats were pathetic in all of this. Everybody signed up and went along with the approach of this program. And the reason why the transparency ultimately ends up being so important is because they put a cap on the funding,
right?
Because they're, picking winners and losers going on at the bank level and the Treasury level on down. And so accountability after the fact is kind of the lamest possible thing that we could get. But at this point, it's about all that's left now that the horse has left the barn. I mean, I always thought it was ridiculous that Dems were sort of trying to theatrically display that they were going to get this accountability and get this transparency when the real problem was the structure of the program to start with.
Yeah.
But now, clearly, we're not even getting that, accountability after the fact so that we can be mad about what happened.
That's how I feel about the whole thing, which is that, look, I think that fights over transparency, fine, I'm totally for it. But really what it is about the structure itself is that why are we not asking much, much bigger questions about, the size of the bailout? Why was the assumption made that forcing people into mass unemployment was a good decision? And look at the unemployment rate that we have right now. A real-time effective around 15%, with the Federal Reserve saying that it's going to go on in double digits for months, if not years, in order to recover from this economic depression and catastrophe. There's no discussion of that. And you don't even see that in the way that we question our elected officials, because it's like we have to bring it down to we can get you on the fact that you're not being transparent. But why don't we get somebody and put them on the spot for why did you make the explicit choice? And why are you continuing to make the explicit choice in order to not cover American people's payroll? I don't think I've seen a single politician get pressed on that. It's so outside the realm of political reality that that's what's really depressing to me. And you saw a little bit of this actually real-time economic display of the fights and the tensions within the White House that I've covered here. Peter Navarro, he's an economic nationalist, one of the true guys in the White House who actually understands what's going on, has a very different view of what the next bailout should be than some of the other people in the White House and Mitch McConnell himself. Let's take a listen to what Peter had to say.
The phase 4, you talk about a $3 trillion program by Nancy Pelosi. You hear from Mitch McConnell, only $1 trillion. The president is very interested in something on the order of at least $2 trillion, with a bulk of that focused on bringing home our manufacturing base, starting with pharmaceuticals and medical supplies and equipment.
So you saw that, Krystal, calling Mitch McConnell out basically by name. In Washington speak, that's actually quite a shot across the bow, you can see Mitch McConnell only wants to do $1 trillion. And a lot of that is paired with corporate liability or with, in back to work incentive programs. But there's no real structural thinking that we have. And as we've covered here before, which is the executive order that Navarro was talking about, or one of the things that he's talked about repatriating supply chains, was even blocked in the own White House by people who were afraid that it would screw over or that would piss off I think it was the pharmaceutical industry, because they would have to spend more money in order to employ more Americans and bring their supply chains back to the U.S. You can't make it up.
You can't. I mean, that particular order is basically, a Buy American order, which would not even go into effect right away. Right. We're not talking about overnight. This is like gradual, small ball, slow over time. Even that, within this administration, which has at times taken a very aggressive stance towards China, even that was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if we can do that. And I guess that's part of my question here, which is, it's not that we haven't spent enough money. It's not the size of the package that has been the issue. Other countries have spent less on a per capita basis and gotten better results. It's a question about who that money is going to. What is the structure of the program? What is it going to do? So what the House passed, their $3 trillion bill, it had some good stuff in it. And then it had some things like a corporate lobbyist bailout, what is Mitch McConnell proposing? I mean, part of what he wants is this corporate liability shield so that anyone who gets coronavirus out of corporate negligence, something that we know when you have that liability shield in place, it actually correlates with more coronavirus infection. So that's part of what he wants. Like, what else does he want? Some tax breaks for corporations, a capital gains tax cut, a payroll tax cut, which, payroll tax cut, okay, if it's part of a larger package. So again, I want to know more about not just is it $1 or $2 or $3 trillion, but what are the specifics in there? Because that piece actually matters a whole lot more than the ultimate dollar price tag. We spent a lot of money. It's not that we didn't spend a lot of money.
Yes.
It's that it went to the wrong people, the wrong places, went up the chain instead of to the people who were most vulnerable and most impacted during this whole situation.
Right. I mean, the distributed layoffs by sector in terms of income, disproportionately lower income and middle class income are the people who are suffering. The unemployment rate for people who were making like $200,000 or more a year is like 5%. It's barely moved, right? It's like the old unemployment rate, and the unemployment rate for others at the lower end of the income spectrum it's in like the 40%, 50%. I mean, these are people who, again, at the end of July, the unemployment program is going to expire, the expanded benefits. What are they going to replace it with? If it's a back to work incentive, okay, fine. I mean, I think that's okay. But it's a bit of a slap in the face to all of the grocery store workers and essential workers who are out there for the last 3 months not getting an incentive in order to continue to show up for work. In some cases, even saw a temporary $2 increase or something go away. I think the way you said it was great, which is that it's not about the money. It's not about the amount of money. It's about where that money is being spent. And over again, we see that in this particular case, that we get caught up in the who got what money. Yeah, that's a good discussion. But the bigger discussion is one we have here. What kind of society are we going to live in after all of this is happening? And it's not looking good right now.
Yeah, I mean, the part of why, going back to the Jake Tapper, Larry Kudlow exchange, right? Part of why people cared so much about Chris getting a bailout and what was it, the LA Lakers and other sort of larger scale businesses getting money is because so many small businesses weren't. It's because the structure of the program itself was such a problem. If you had enough funds, yes, fine. They employ people to help everybody get through this time and make sure they can keep their workers on board. But since you didn't have that, then it becomes really important to find out after the fact, who got what and who was left out. Transparency after the fact is apparently the best and, that they can possibly push for or hope for at this point because they didn't challenge the structure of this thing from the very beginning. And so, look, we covered last week on the show, there was a big stock market crash, right? Where
I think another one today, right?
What's that?
Yeah, another one today, apparently.
Oh, another one today. I haven't looked at the markets. Suddenly there seems to be more energy, Saagar, around providing some stimulus response. I know we're all shocked that it turns out that's the one metric. The first time that they passed the huge multi-trillion-dollar bailout, it was because the markets were tanking. As soon as the markets were doing well, then it was like, we don't really need to do anything. And how about that debt and the deficit? And I'm not just talking about Republicans either. A bunch of blue dog Democrats were like, we've got to worry about the deficit now. Now that the stock market is tanking, they're starting to think hard again about maybe providing some additional relief. Interesting how that works, isn't it?
So what we really need to do is tie lower wage workers' benefits to the stock market. And then that's how we all really win. But then they'd probably just stop caring about it altogether. But all right. All right, everybody. We're going to have more Rising for you right after this.